6 months ago, we built this wildlife pond to try to attract breeding amphibians in the spring. In this video, we'll see how the pond started and how it evolved during its first growing season. At the front, we have a trout pond, and it's a decent size, but the only amphibians that breed here are green frogs. Most of our early spring breeders like wood frogs, blue spotted, and spotted salamanders tend to avoid this pond because of the fish. So building a smaller, fish-free pond nearby would give them another potential breeding site and add a water feature that we're lacking on the wildlife homestead. The goal was to build a vernal pond, which is a shallow, seasonal pond that'll hold water just long enough for our target species to complete their life cycle in, usually 2 to 3 months. There's many benefits of shallow ponds. Light can easily penetrate the water, stimulating growth of plants and algae, which form the base of the food web. The water also warms up quicker, allowing amphibians and invertebrates to develop faster, and having a site that's flooded for part of the year and dry for the rest attracts a unique mix of plant and animal species that depend on these conditions. So early this spring, we started to dig this vernal pool below the existing trout pond. We wanted to build a completely natural pond with no liners, and this was the perfect place to do it. Snowmelt, rainwater, and some overflow from the trout pond flow directly through this grassy area, so we'll have plenty of water filling up the pond naturally. And most importantly, the soil here is deep clay, which is the key to having the pool hold water. We started by digging these small, shallow pools to funnel water down to the main pond. When snow starts to melt in the spring, water can really rush through this section, so having something to catch and slowly divert water down will be great for minimizing erosion and trapping excess nutrients. To dig the main pool, we used a backhoe to scoop up clay and pile it along the backside to form a small dam. This isn't the traditional way of doing it, but since we were aiming for a seasonal pool and not a permanent pond, it only had to be sealed enough to hold water for a few months. On the opposite side of the dam, we made a gentle slope so wildlife can get in and out of the pond more easily, and we dug the deepest section to around 2 feet deep, which might seem a little shallow, but most natural ephemeral ponds are only 3 feet deep or less, so it's what most vernal pool species are adapted to living in. Overall, this only took us a couple of hours. This is what it looked like when we finished up, and the next day, most of the sediment had settled down and it was already looking clearer. I then leveled out the dam and seeded it with native grasses and wildflowers. I added some branches for amphibians to attach their eggs to and for dragonflies to perch on, and a bucket of leaves to provide cover on the pond floor. I then built a bat box and set it up behind the vernal pond. We didn't see many bats our first year here. Sadly, their populations have taken a huge hit over the years, but they're a key component of a healthy ecosystem, so hopefully providing boxes for them can attract more to our property. Now all that was left to do was wait for the surrounding vegetation to start growing back in and for the first species to show up to the vernal pond. With the trout pond overflowing into the new vernal pond, it didn't take long for the first signs of life to appear. Thousands of tiny Daphnia, which are small crustaceans, were carried down from the flowing water. These filter feeders play a critical role in the ecosystem as they primarily feed on algae and bacteria, which significantly lower the chances of harmful blooms. Being this small, there's no surprise that they're also an important food source for some of the larger pond dwellers. Shortly after their arrival, diving beetles and backswimmers found the vernal pond. At the rate at which Daphnia reproduce, the larger invertebrates should have an endless food supply for the entire growing season. With barely any vegetation surrounding the pond, it was nice to see that we were already getting some action. Phoebes and robins were coming here to hunt for food and collect clay for their nests. One of my target species, the wood frog, visited the pond in early spring to breed. I think next year we'll get even more wood frogs and in general more species breeding in here once all of the plants thicken up and provide more cover. In terms of cover, they don't really need much. You may remember that last year I built a bird bathing area with different pools and waterfalls. I used a lot of rocks to surround the pools, and funny enough, before I was able to get the pump out this spring to start the waterfalls, Spring peepers were hiding in all of the gaps between the rocks and breeding in the water. I didn't want to potentially harm the tadpoles with the pump, so I decided to let them have this area for the year, and I used it as a plant nursery instead. I think it's important to always be flexible when creating structures for wildlife, because how you intend for them to be used and how they're actually used are sometimes two different things. Just like the bat box that I set up next to the vernal pool turned into a hunting perch for eastern bluebirds. As we saw in the last video, these bluebirds nested right beside the vernal pond and were pretty active the entire season. Bats, on the other hand, were virtually non-existent. We didn't get any using the box that I set up, but the really sad part is I've only seen one this entire year flying above our forest pond. As the warm summer weather moved in, this is when the pond would go through its biggest transformation. The water levels began to fluctuate, and this is a key step in the life of the vernal pond. As the water evaporates, it exposes the soil and allows new seeds to germinate. Seemingly overnight, the water was surrounded by greenery. Our wood frog tadpoles now had even more hiding places in the pond. The vegetation that started growing was a mix between plants that I seeded and plants that were already established or in the seed bank, just waiting for the right conditions to come around. With this flush of plant life, this brought in more species to the pond. Robins that were nesting on our garage eventually fledged, and they visited with their parents to hunt and bathe. A great blue heron showed up to hunt, as well as a solitary sandpiper. But probably my favorite sighting was this juvenile American bittern. Bitterns usually hang out in large wetlands, well hidden amongst the tall grasses. This one only stayed for a few minutes before being flushed by a passing car, but the fact that the vernal pond was able to draw in this secretive species in the first place was incredibly rewarding. Despite the bird activity, hands down the most active and most noticeable animals were the dragonflies and damselflies. They moved back and forth between both ponds using the perches that I set up for them, which were perfect for surveying the water for an easy meal. Between the insects hovering above the water and the ones moving around the vegetation, they have endless options to choose from. Watching them fly is not only entertaining, it's almost hypnotizing. Dragonflies and damselflies are among the most ancient groups of insects, and surprisingly, their anatomy has gone largely unchanged for millions of years. But being the aerial acrobats that they are, they require large amounts of food to fuel this demand. Depending on their size, they can eat dozens or sometimes hundreds of small insects in a day, or they can go for quality over quantity and even hunt one of their own. With the breeding season in full swing, this energy demand is even higher. Males are constantly patrolling and defending their territory, waiting for any female to wander into their space. In the case of these bluet damselflies, this male has successfully initiated courtship with the female. He uses his specialized claspers at the end of his abdomen to grasp her neck. With a bit of maneuvering, she brings her abdomen up to the male to form a heart-shaped mating wheel. While in this position, the male will remove any sperm from previous matings, ensuring his own sperm has the best chance at fertilizing the eggs. This mating ritual isn't exclusive to bluet damselflies. Around the pond, many different species are locked in this mating wheel. Once fertilized, the female will begin laying the eggs. Every time her abdomen touches the water, she's depositing an egg. But this isn't the only way of laying. Sometimes she'll use her sharp ovipositor to slice into stems and inject her eggs directly into the plant tissue. This is one of the reasons why the vegetation around the pond is so important. Not only for dragonfly and damselfly life cycles, but for many other invertebrates as well. Above the water, I was excited to find this interesting egg mass. The tiny white dots inside this gelatinous mass will give rise to one of the most fascinating pond creatures, caddisfly larvae. When they hatch, they'll begin their underwater lives by building protective cases from materials found inside of the pond. They produce a highly adhesive silk that binds these different materials together, creating a mini fortress around their long, soft bodies that camouflages them into their surroundings. Once protected, they're now safe to start feeding. They have a diverse diet which varies by species. Some will shred decaying plant material, others will collect organic matter that builds up in the water, some scrape algae, and a few species are carnivorous. By occupying different niches, this allows multiple species of caddisfly to coexist within the same water body, similar to how birds feed at different levels in a forest to reduce competition. I'm thrilled to have caddisflies in the vernal pond. Not only do I enjoy seeing the intricate cases they build, but their presence is also a strong indicator of good water quality. Their bodies are covered with thin, filament-like gills that allow them to absorb oxygen efficiently from the water, but this means that they can only thrive in clean, well-oxygenated environments. If the water becomes polluted or oxygen levels drop, caddisfly larvae are among the first species to disappear, making their presence a reliable sign of a healthy aquatic ecosystem. The same can be said for amphibians. Their thin, permeable skin makes them highly sensitive to changes in water quality. Their presence signals that conditions are favorable not just for themselves, but for a wide range of other species as well. At this time of the year, most of the early spring breeders had emerged and made their way into the forest. Green frogs, however, were abundant in the trout pond. If you live in warmer climates, green frogs can complete their life cycle in 1 year. But in our area, our growing season isn't that long, so green frog tadpoles take 2 years to fully develop. Meaning they're pretty much reliant on permanent ponds rather than vernal pools that dry up too quickly. With the breeding season in full swing, I watched some of the most intense fights I've ever seen while these green frogs defended their territories. Once the breeding season was done, some green frogs made their way into the vernal pond, likely to prey on all of the insects. I mentioned earlier in the video that the goal with this pond was to have it dry up after roughly 3 months, and there were a couple of times where it came really close to fully drying up, but we would get hit with bigger rainstorms and the pond would fill up completely. It's funny, if we built this to be a permanent pond, I guarantee you the thing would leak left, right, and center. But we built it to dry up and somehow it's fully sealed. Ultimately, I think it'll depend on the year. Some drier years it'll probably dry up completely, and in others it might only dry up 75%. Either way, it should still serve its purpose. In the fall, I started to see the first plants starting to flower along the dam. Even though I seeded perennials, which should only flower in the second year, sometimes if the conditions are perfect, they'll be able to put out some flowers in year 1. The dam was dotted with blue vervain, grassleaf goldenrod, and a couple great blue lobelias. I added plugs of another lobelia species, the cardinal flower, so next year when these plants really get going, we should be getting constant visits from hummingbirds. We also had red foxes start using the pond, and it was really nice to see them again. It's been a pretty bad year for red fox sightings. Last year we had the adults raise 5 kits right around their garage, and we were able to see them every day for hours on end. But this year we rarely saw the kits, and when they would show up, there would only be 2. To make matters worse, one morning my partner was walking our dog and she found one of the kits barely breathing in the middle of the road. She was able to bring her inside and we warmed her up while we got in contact with a rehab center. Some centers can only take animals from their area, and the closest one was a few hours away, so we were a little worried. But luckily, they were able to take her in as long as we drove her to the center. She was good the whole way, and we were able to drop her off without a hitch. We got an email back a couple of weeks later, and thankfully she had stabilized and was starting to recover with a group of other injured red fox kits that were brought in. Comparing both years, it really seemed like the red foxes faced quite a few more challenges this year, so it was encouraging to watch them have a bit of fun while hunting around the vernal pond and in the surrounding meadows. Towards the end of the season, I had a good laugh watching this crafty fox steal apples from our tree. The last thing I did to the vernal pond was plant blue flag iris seeds that I collected from the forest pond. They're one of my favorite wetland plants and they should do really well around the water's edge. Overall, it was a great first year. This was a bit of an experiment considering it was my first time both building a vernal pond and building a pond without a liner. And even though it didn't quite work out exactly as we had hoped, with the pond not drying up completely, I still think we had a productive first year, and I'm excited to see what next year holds as the plants and ponds bring in even more species.